All right, guys, this is Trevenchy, and this is my week 3 reaction to everything that has happened in the atmosphere of college football, in particular to the games that happened from Thursday to last Saturday. First things first, Thursday's game with ASU Texas State was a ESPN classic. I absolutely loved the talent on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. I think both teams showed up, and it was so competitive. Just the fact that Texas State was hosting a Power Four conference team, and they took that seriously. So it was just a jam packed game with a lot of splash plays, definitely some missed assignments on both ends, but a wild ending when we ultimately saw Arizona State's defense pull through. Then we go to your Friday 2 game classics, some two Big 12 games, which I absolutely loved within the Kansas and UNLV game and the Kansas State versus Arizona game. Kansas State knocked off Arizona at home in Arizona's first ever game in the Big 12. It was a rude introduction for sure, to say the least. I think Avery Johnson balled out, but I think the entire story should be around the running back room of Kansas State. With DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards, these guys were establishing a lot of consistency throughout the game, and it was really interesting to see Dylan Edwards was more of the first half back. You would expect DJ Giddens to come out the gate running the ball, but the consistency was there with Mr. Edwards, and then we had DJ Giddens eventually take over with Avery Johnson balling out. Really good stuff. I can't wait to see more of Kansas State football. Maybe they are frauds or not. We'll see, just as they play some more difficult teams. But I definitely think after Friday's loss, Arizona may end up being a bottom half Big 12 team after being projected to have potentially 2 Heisman contenders, and I think their over-under was at 9 wins. So really cool things to see. And then also the UNLV game with Kansas. Man, Jalen Daniels, 2 costly interceptions in the second half, had a great first half, established his consistency with his legs, but this team is struggling to prove themselves as multidimensional. Kansas pretty much just relies on Devin Neal at this point, and it's visible. Their defense is not as suspect yet. Kobe Bryant is still NFL talent, but they're still struggling to adjust, at least to establish some sort of identity. Whereas UNLV, they got by. They used their quarterback's legs, and it was a really great game just on the run for them. Their quarterback only completed 8 passes, but hey, that's all you need if you're trying to get the W. It's going to be ugly. They won in Kansas, so a remarkable game from the Rebels of the Mountain West. But UNLV looks to establish some sort of consistency this season and potentially earn a spot for that non-Power 4 conference team in the college football playoff bracket. Now we go straight into it. It was a great jam-packed morning. Oklahoma State proved their consistency against Tulsa. They were struggling a little bit against Arkansas last week, but ultimately they came back around, established their identity again, and as they approach Big 12 season, they face a difficult Utah team, but Tulsa did not show up. It was a hard-to-watch game, but we'll definitely be excited to see more of Cowboys football this year. Now, some other morning games that were remarkable. I loved the Boston College versus Missouri game. Brady Cook, Lutheran Burden. These guys are really, really good at playing football, man. You could see the chemistry. It was cool just to see some of the consistencies on their long drives. It was visible that they had their identities. Both of them were very confident, but Missouri came out on top with a great offensive showing in the fourth quarter, and would definitely be excited to see if Mizzou can represent some SEC consistency, if they can represent and potentially earn a spot in the playoff bracket, as these SEC teams look kind of competitive this year. We'll definitely be excited to reflect on that. Some other games that I absolutely loved from the morning, with Tyler Van Dyke going down with Wisconsin. Alabama established their consistency. That was very, very interesting. And then we go over the LSU South Carolina game. LSU came back from down 17. They proved themselves as at least a contender for the SEC this year. I think their first game was a little bit fluky just based on what was going on, but I definitely am excited to see where LSU can turn out to be this year. Then some other teams that I absolutely love to watch was the Tulane Oklahoma game. That got out of hand pretty quickly. And then as well as these rivalries, right? So we have the Apple Cup, we have the Backyard Brawl, and then we had the Battle of the Brothers, and then the Oregon rivalry as well. So Oregon established their dominance against Oregon State, whereas the Apple Cup, it was a great competitive game. Washington State came out on top, and I'm definitely excited to see how they represent the Pac-12 or the Pac-2 right now as they look to earn a spot in that non-Power 4 conference in the playoff bracket. But Washington definitely has to work out some kinks. I wouldn't consider them the doormat of the Big Ten yet. I think I'm going to reserve that role for UCLA. But again, it's going to be very competitive to see how this Big Ten shakes out. And then in terms of the Backyard Brawl, phenomenal game from West Virginia and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh comes back again with the late surgeons after they beat Cincinnati last week, being down a great deficit. They come back again against West Virginia in ultimate fashion to win the Backyard Brawl, which is very competitive for those teams. And then Utah versus Utah State. Mr. Wilson, Zach Wilson's little brother. We'll definitely see if he gets some more PT this season, if Cameron Rising is going to be injured more frequently than they expected. But Utah State had that game. They really could have at least established some momentum. They missed when they were in scoring position, they missed some. They just lacked execution towards the end of it. And that score really devalues how competitive that game was, but I definitely can't wait to see how Utah does against Oklahoma State this week. So that'll pretty much tell the testament of whether they're a legit contender in the Big 12 or not. Some other games that I absolutely loved was obviously the Memphis versus Florida State game. Memphis got their revenge on Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell, originally a coach for Memphis for 4 years from 2016 to 2020, then going and accepting the Florida State offer. Memphis got the last laugh as they forced Mike Norvell and his Seminoles to 0-3. Florida State could only score 12 points on the Memphis Tigers. So kind of shocking game. Really cool stuff to watch, but ultimately Florida State's out of it now. They cannot. Their best case scenario is to earn a bowl game at this point. Some other games that I really thought caught my eye was the Texas UTSA game, just simply because Quinn Ewers went down, Arch Manning stepped up. Maybe we'll see some more Arch Manning football this year, but he looked legit. It wasn't just about the family name anymore. Arch Manning might actually be a great quarterback. So all this time behind a very talented Quinn Ewers may end up helping this team in the long run. And then I was very shocked to see Texas Tech reestablish their dominance against North Texas because they lost the previous week to Washington State. Of course, Wazoo is representing right now the Pac-2, but right now, Texas Tech needed it. Taj Brooks became healthy again, and now they go into a great Big 12 showdown against our Sun Devils. I'm excited to see this Red Raiders team, but not when they play us. Hopefully, they have a rude awakening. And then some other amazing games that I liked. Auburn, New Mexico. Auburn reestablished their dominance again. They were struggling. They lost to Cal last week. Now they're back in the conversation. So we'll get to see some more of Auburn football. Maybe they can be potential upset contenders, like they could knock off a Alabama team, or they could maybe knock off just SEC team that you wouldn't expect. But again, these Auburn Tigers will not go down without a fight. Some other games, I think we're nearing the afternoon slate now. Uh, I absolutely love to watch Toledo handle Mississippi State. Mississippi State coach Jeff Lebby, they're struggling right now, man. Like, we really put them in their place, but now it's a struggle. We beat Mississippi State Bulldogs, but they go back home to Mississippi State and lose to the Toledo Rockets in a very ugly style. Toledo puts 38 points on this team. Really remarkable play from them. Obviously, I want Mississippi State to not be the doormat, but man, like, it's hard to watch. And I'm going to correct myself. Toledo actually put 41 on them. So they hit a last-minute field goal, but it was mainly a 38 points within like the first three quarters. Toledo absolutely dominated that game. So really interesting to see. Another great classic. Now that we're going into the afternoon slate, some of the most exciting games of Saturday. We'll start it off with the Colorado versus Colorado State game. Shedeur Sanders proved his consistency. He found Travis Hunter in some adventurous ways. That's pretty much what the game plan needs to be. How can they revolve their offense around these talented players and at least form some sort of identity? But other receivers on Colorado definitely stepped up. They proved that they are deep in that wide receiver room, and they're going to need it. They're going to have to be in a lot of air raid offense, high-scoring games this season because their defense is still a little suspect, but they did contain Colorado State very well. Another game that I absolutely was interested to see in was Indiana handling UCLA. Indiana actually looks a little formidable this season. They might not be a doormat of the Big Ten per usual. UCLA is looking to take on that role. I mean, it's going to take a few years for UCLA to adjust to the new brand of football, but Indiana looks like a potential upset contender as well, since we are on that topic. And then one of my favorite games I absolutely loved was the UCF TCU game. This one had me on the edge of my seat the entire game. Second half, UCF comes back from down 7-28. They end up holding TCU to only 6 points the entire second half. It was a really cool thing to see. They won it in the 35-34 Classic in Fort Worth on their family weekend. Amazing stuff to see from those Knights. RJ Harvey is legit. RJ Harvey is looking to prove himself as a top 3 running back in the Big 12. Devin Neal, RJ Harvey, Cam Scadaboo. Maybe Taj Brooks is in the conversation, but maybe Ollie Gordon hasn't really done much yet. He's definitely one of the most talented people in that conference, but man, these running backs in the Big 12, they're fun to watch. They really are fun to watch. Another great game was BYU establishing some consistency against Wyoming. So the Cougars are back. We'll definitely get to see how they prove themselves in the Big 12 this year. It was a little rough last year. But again, they're back, right? They got to prove themselves. I'm excited to see them as our team is hosting BYU. But again, they needed that win. They needed to establish some sort of authority and at least feeling some sort of momentum going into the Big 12 conference play this week. And then another great game was Cal Berkeley completely handling San Diego State. This is 2 amazing weeks from Cal Berkeley as they beat Auburn and now they beat SDSU. But ultimately, I am really excited to see if they can establish some sort of ACC presence. The ACC looks wide open right now. Every team looks beatable. Maybe Miami is probably the number 1 guy or number 1 spot because they have Cam Ward as their quarterback. He's definitely proving himself as a Heisman contender. And, man, we'll definitely get to see some more play from him, but he's been the most consistent out of all the Heisman contender quarterbacks. Like Quinn Ewers goes down. Shedeur Sanders struggled last week. Carson Beck. Now that this is a great segue for this next game, but of course, Carson Beck wasn't perfect. He wasn't bad either, but wasn't perfect. But the game plan by the Kentucky Wildcats hosting Georgia Bulldogs in the afternoon slate, what a wonderful game. defense, defense, defense. The game plan was simple. They were trying to drain the time of possession, and they were trying to keep it close, and they did exactly that. Georgia escapes with a 1-point lead. They win that game, but man, they looked beatable. So a formula for sure put on tape by the Kentucky Wildcats for any future teams to beat them. Obviously, I think the best team to beat Georgia this year will be Texas on October 19th. And then other than that, that is all the games that I absolutely loved, that caught my eye. This is the first week of conference play this week, so I am excited to see who is going to establish some sort of dominance. My game to watch obviously is the Utah-Oklahoma State game, just with the implications of the Big 12, how it's going to shake out. But again, each conference is very competitive this year. The Big 10, maybe there are those top 4 teams are separating themselves in Oregon, USC, Ohio State, and Nebraska. But we'll definitely see if there's a potential trap games, upsets to occur in the next few weeks. But in terms of the Big 12, it looks wide open right now. Seriously, TCU first half versus UCF looked like one of the better teams in the Big 12. They looked top 4, top 3 at least. But then the second half came around, adjustments were made. Man, I like UCF. So we'll definitely see how the Big 12 shakes out. I'll do some more Big 12 breakdowns. And then the SEC, yeah, Alabama dominated, but it was still a low-scoring first half. They didn't dominate in the first half, especially considering that Wisconsin was QB2ing it out there. But definitely excited to see how Alabama does. And probably the more dominant team right now with all the confidence is Tennessee, just because they look amazing, but they haven't really played someone legit yet. I mean, if you consider NC State legit, but we all knew it was going to be Tennessee in that game. So other than that, I cannot wait to cover these Power 4 conferences. Maybe Cal and Miami fight it out for the ACC. We'll see. But as of right now, my takes are pretty clear. I think that the SEC only puts out 3 teams: Georgia, Bama, and Missouri. Big 12 puts out 3 teams, and us, ASU, Utah, or Oklahoma State. We'll see this week. And then Kansas State, perhaps. And then I think the Big 10 puts out 4 within the Ohio State, Oregon, USC, and Nebraska. Honestly, Nebraska might make a playoff run. They got a particularly easy schedule, so their toughest opponent is us, the Buckeyes. So I'm really excited to see how that shakes out. And then the ACC probably is only going to put out 1 team. It's either going to be Miami or Miami, because Cam Ward looks good. He looks like a Heisman contender. So, and then obviously the non-Power 4 school, whether it's UNLV, Boise State, or Wazoo. We'll definitely see how those teams fight it out. But this is Trevenchy. This is my Week 3 reaction. Absolutely loved the slate, loved the rivalries. I would just say my favorite game was obviously the UCF TCU game, but that Apple Cup game was very entertaining, as well as the Backyard Brawl. And I definitely can't wait to watch the replay of the Missouri-Boston College game, as those teams definitely both of them have their identities in check. So other than that, this is Trevenchy. Thanks for watching, and we'll definitely do a Week 4 marquee matchups preview in a few days. So thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys soon.